Right now, 95% of the artificial intelligence revolution is hanging by a single microscopic thread. Hello, this is Warm Insight. Today we are going to talk about the accelerating impact of artificial intelligence on the technology sector and its profound strategic realignment. Leaving a like and subscribing is a huge help to us. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in the middle of the United States. Back in the 1950s, the government has just announced the creation of the massive interstate highway system. It is a project so large that it will completely change human geography. Now, if you wanted to become incredibly wealthy during this massive construction boom, what would you do? Most people would try to start a trucking company or build a fleet of cars. They would want to be the ones driving on the new roads. But the smartest people, the people who made generational fortunes, did not build cars. They bought the rock quarries. They bought the concrete mixing plants. They bought the companies that made the asphalt. They knew that before a single car could drive across the country, millions of tons of raw material had to be poured into the dirt. Today, we are watching the exact same thing happen with artificial intelligence. The global economic landscape is completely bifurcated right now. A bifurcated market just means the market is split into two very different halves. On one side, you have the flashy companies trying to build the final product. These are the artificial intelligence developers like OpenAI and Anthropic. They are building the navigation systems for our brains. They are writing the software that will write our emails, diagnose our diseases, and drive our cars. They are the shiny new sports cars of the modern era. But on the exact opposite side of the market, you have the concrete suppliers. You have the companies that are quietly building the absolute bare-bones infrastructure required to make any of this possible. Let us talk about a company called ASML. If you look at the entire global technology market, ASML is the single most important company that most people have never even heard of. They are a Dutch company, and they hold an absolute monopoly on a technology called extreme ultraviolet lithography. To understand why this matters, we need to translate this into simple terms. Think of a computer chip as an incredibly massive city filled with billions of tiny light switches. These switches turn on and off to process information. The more switches you can cram into a tiny square of silicon, the faster and smarter the computer becomes. But how do you draw billions of microscopic switches onto a piece of rock? You cannot use a pen, you have to use light. This is where ASML comes in. They build a machine that is essentially the most complex and expensive slide projector in the history of the universe. This machine costs hundreds of millions of dollars. To create the specific type of light needed to draw these microscopic blueprints, the machine does something that sounds like pure science fiction. Inside a massive vacuum chamber, the machine drops a microscopic sphere of liquid tin. As this tiny drop of metal falls through the empty space, a massive carbon dioxide laser shoots it. But it does not just shoot it once. The laser hits the dropping tin 50,000 times every single second. This intense laser bombardment vaporizes the tin and turns it into a glowing plasma that burns at roughly 220,000 degrees Celsius. To put that into perspective, that is almost 40 times hotter than the surface of our sun. This miniature blazing sun inside the machine emits a very specific wavelength of invisible light, called extreme ultraviolet light. This light is then bounced off a series of the most perfectly smooth mirrors ever created by human hands. If you expanded one of these mirrors to the size of the entire Earth, the tallest mountain on it would be less than a millimeter high. That is how perfect they are. The light bounces off these mirrors and carves lines into the silicon that are only 13 nanometers wide. A single human hair is about 80,000 nanometers wide. ASML is the only company on the planet that knows how to build these machines reliably. They are the sole engineers with the patented blueprints for the paving machines on our new artificial intelligence highway. Because of this total dominance, their stock sits at nearly $1,000 a share. They are the ultimate bottleneck. Without ASML, the entire global artificial intelligence revolution instantly stops dead in its tracks. But ASML is not the only company providing the raw materials. We also have to look at semiconductor giants like Advanced Micro Devices and Micron Technology. Right now, their stock charts look like rockets leaving the atmosphere. Why is this happening? To understand their explosion in value, we need to look back at one of the most famous wealth creation events in American history. We need to look at the California gold rush of 1848. When gold was discovered at Sutter Mill, Absolute madness swept across the nation. Hundreds of thousands of people left their jobs, sold their homes, and traveled across dangerous pioneer trails, just for the chance to strike it rich. They were blinded by the promise of instant wealth. But history tells us a very dark secret about the gold rush. Almost none of the miners actually got rich. Most of them went entirely bankrupt, died of disease, or returned home poorer than when they left. The gold was too hard to find, and the competition was too fierce. However, there was a man named Samuel Brannan. When Samuel Brannan heard that gold had been discovered, he did not run out to the river with a pan to sift through the freezing mud. Instead, he quietly walked around the city of San Francisco and bought every single pickaxe, shovel, and mining pan he could find. He cornered the market on the essential tools. He bought the pans for 20 cents each. Then he walked down the streets shouting that gold had been found. When the frenzied crowds rushed to the stores to buy supplies, Brannan was the only one selling them. He sold those 20-cent pans for $15 apiece. In less than 10 weeks, he made the equivalent of millions of dollars in modern money. Samuel Brannan became the first millionaire of the California gold rush, without ever digging up a single ounce of gold himself. Advanced micro devices and micron technology are the Samuel Brannan of the artificial intelligence boom. They are the pick and shovel sellers of our generation. Every single company in the world right now, from massive banks to tiny startup companies, is rushing into the market trying to strike gold with artificial intelligence. They all want to build the best chatbot or the smartest algorithm. But to do that, they need massive amounts of computing power. They need data centers filled with thousands of specialized computer chips. Advanced micro devices makes the silicon picks. Micron technology makes the memory shovels. They do not care which artificial intelligence startup actually wins the race. They do not care if a new software company goes bankrupt tomorrow. As long as the race is happening, everyone is forced to buy their tools. This relentless demand is outstripping global supply, creating an incredibly robust foundation for their stock prices. But the technology sector is not just about raw computer chips. We are also witnessing massive strategic realignments in the real world. We are seeing legacy industries panic and form desperate alliances to survive. A perfect example of this is the recent partnership between the massive German automaker Volkswagen and the young electric vehicle startup Rivian. Volkswagen recently injected a massive amount of capital into Rivian, driving Rivian stock up significantly. But why would one of the oldest and largest car companies on Earth need to pump money into a struggling young startup? To understand this, we need to look at a concept called the innovator dilemma. Coined by Harvard professor Clayton Christensen, the innovator dilemma explains why massive, successful companies eventually fail. When a company becomes a giant, it gets really good at doing exactly one thing. Volkswagen is incredibly good at bending metal and building internal combustion engines. They have spent the last 80 years perfecting the art of controlled gasoline, explosions inside metal tubes. But the future of transportation is no longer about bending metal. The future is the software-defined vehicle. Think of a modern electric vehicle, not as a car, but as a giant iPhone with wheels. The actual mechanical parts of the car are becoming less important than the computer brain controlling them. Volkswagen knows how to build the body, but they are terrified because they do not know how to build the brain. Their internal software divisions have struggled massively. They are facing a world where their cars will be obsolete if they cannot integrate advanced artificial intelligence seamlessly into the dashboard. Rivian, on the other hand, was born in the digital age. They built their cars from the ground up around central computers. By investing in Rivian, Volkswagen is essentially buying a lifeboat. They are trying to staple Rivian, modern software, onto their massive global manufacturing scale. This represents a massive shift. Capital is moving away from traditional mechanical engineering and flowing directly into companies that can merge physical objects with artificial intelligence. However, this massive explosion of progress is bringing unprecedented systemic risks to the entire global economy. Systemic risk means a danger that is so large, it could crash the entire system all at once, rather than just hurting one specific company. The systemic risk heat map right now is glowing bright red. Artificial intelligence development is sitting at a terrifying 90% risk level. Why? Because we are building airplanes while simultaneously laying the runway, and we have absolutely no air traffic control. This brings us to the profound warnings coming from the leaders of these artificial intelligence companies. the chief executive officer of Anthropic, recently warned the world about the severe cybersecurity vulnerabilities created by these new models. At the same time, OpenAI is pushing the boundaries of what is possible, with models like GPT 5.5 Instant. These systems are becoming so smart that they can write their own computer code, hack into secure networks, and manipulate human beings. Let us look at a historical parallel. Back in the early 1900s, the medicine industry in the United States was completely unregulated. Anyone could mix together a bottle of alcohol, food, coloring, and dangerous chemicals and sell it as a miracle cure. People were getting incredibly sick. Children were dying from poisoned cough syrup. The public outcry became so massive that the government was forced to step in and create the Food and Drug Administration. They had to create a massive regulatory body just to ensure that the things we consumed did not kill us. We are currently in the snake oil phase of artificial intelligence. Governments around the world are completely panicking. They are watching these massive technology companies deploy tools that could disrupt global elections, automate millions of jobs out of existence, and create biological weapons. The geopolitical dimension is becoming incredibly tense. Every single nation realizes that whoever controls the best artificial intelligence will control the global economy for the next century. This means heavy government regulation is inevitable. When the governments finally step in, they will force these companies to slow down. They will force them to spend billions of dollars on safety compliance. This sudden regulatory wall is the institutional bear case for the tech sector. If regulations hit too hard, the massive profit margins of these artificial intelligence companies will completely evaporate, and the speculative capital will run away in terror. This terror is deeply connected to the psychological behavior of the market right now. We are witnessing what economists call herd behavior. Herd behavior is exactly what it sounds like. It is when thousands of animals, or in this case, millions of human investors, all start running in the exact same direction, simply because everyone else is doing it. Right now, retail investors are being bombarded with news about record earnings. They open their phones and see social media influencers bragging about doubling their money overnight on random artificial intelligence stocks. This creates a deeply toxic psychological state, known as the fear of missing out. When fear of missing out takes over, logic completely leaves the room. People stop looking at how much money a company actually makes. They stop looking at the fundamental reality of the business. Instead, they buy the stock. Just because the company has the word artificial intelligence in its name, this leads to a state of irrational exuberance. This term was famously used by the former Federal Reserve, Chairman Alan Greenspan, to describe the madness of the stock market right before it collapsed. We have seen this exact movie before. In the late 1990s, the world realized that the internet was going to change everything, and they were right. The internet did change everything, but the investors went completely insane. They started throwing millions of dollars at any company. That ended with the .com. There was a company called Pets.com. They sold dog food over the internet. They had a funny sock puppet mascot on television. Investors pumped millions into it. The stock went through the roof. But there was one massive problem. It cost them more money to ship a heavy bag of dog food than they were actually charging the customer. The fundamental business math was completely broken. When the market finally woke up and realized this, the entire .com bubble violently popped. Trillions of dollars of wealth were completely wiped out in a matter of months. We are in severe danger of repeating that exact same historical mistake. The current tech environment is creating dangerous bubbles in the highly volatile software and development sectors. The herd is running blindly toward the cliff. But the institutional playbook, the way the smartest money in the world operates, requires a completely different approach. It requires a contrarian mindset. Being a contrarian means you look at what the screaming crowd is doing, and you slowly walk in the opposite direction. While the amateur investors are gambling their life savings on highly speculative, unproven artificial intelligence startups, the smart money is quietly securing the fortress. They are deploying a strategy known as the generational bargain. They recognize that artificial intelligence is a generational wealth opportunity, but they refuse to pay inflated prices. This is why top-tier investors use the asset allocation seesaw. They divide their capital strictly. 70% goes into relatively safe broad market stocks. 20% goes into incredibly safe bonds or treasury bills, and 10% is held in pure cash. waiting for a market crash to buy things at a massive discount. When they do buy into the technology sector, they avoid the dangerous individual software companies. Instead, they buy broad exchange-traded funds. They buy funds with ticker symbols like SOXX and SMH. These funds own tiny pieces of every single semiconductor company in the world. By doing this, they do not have to guess which specific company will win the artificial intelligence war. They simply bet that the war will continue to be fought. And they collect the profits from the weapons manufacturers. They also practice a survival mechanic known as dollar cost averaging. Instead of trying to guess the perfect day to buy a stock, they simply buy a small, fixed amount every single week or month. If the stock market crashes, their weekly purchase automatically buys more shares at a steep discount. If the market goes up, their portfolio grows. This takes all the emotion, all the fear, and all the greed completely out of the equation. It is a slow, methodical, and profoundly boring way to become incredibly rich. The biggest mistake you can make right now is chasing viral social media trends. Do not buy meme stocks. Do not gamble your financial future on companies that have no earnings and no real product, just because someone on the internet told you it was a sure thing. The technology sector has always experienced massive cycles of explosive innovation, followed by brutal, crushing consolidation. The weak companies are always destroyed. The strong companies survive and slowly take over the world. Your job as an investor is to find the bedrock, find the rock quarries, find the concrete layers, find the invisible monopolies like ASML that hold the entire global system on their shoulders. In the relentless march of technological innovation, patience and a focus on enduring value creation are the most potent allies against the ephemeral nature of market fads. We couldn't fit all the deep dive details and practical strategies into this video.